All right, I want to talk about automations. So we're going to take a scenario. We have volunteers that apply to be volunteers that we move through stages. And we're going to use, so the stages would look like identified. That means we put them on a list because we're like, we think these would be great volunteers. We send them an email so that they're invited, and the email has a link to a form. We're going to use Typeform for that. And then when they fill out that form, they're going to be moved to applied, and they're going to automatically show up in Attio using an automation. So let's step through that process. So I went ahead and identified a few, and then we're going to go ahead and apply to be a volunteer. So a pretty simple form: what's your name, how'd you hear about us, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this form. All right, so what's your first name? Greg. What's your last name? Goat. Greg at goat.com. What's your number? So what are interests? What are you interested about volunteering? I like to volunteer because I'm a goat. Great. How'd you hear about us? Referral. Okay, so in Typeform, you're going to want to have like an email confirmation that goes out, maybe to the person submitting, but also maybe to yourself. That's for another tutorial, but you should do that. So now that we've submitted that, obviously it lives somewhere in Typeform, but what we really want is it to show up in volunteers. Now, isn't that nifty? So now Greg Goat has a profile in our CRM, and not only that, Greg's been added to our volunteers list, and his stage is applied. And so now, as someone that's managing this volunteer process, I can see Greg Goat flowing through the process. So I want to show you one more thing. That works great, but there's also existing ones. So what happens if Ted Crewell fills out this? In a normal scenario, there would now be a duplicate. So in Typeform, if Ted Crewell fills out that form twice, there's a duplicate. I'm going to show you how this works when Ted Crewell fills out this form. So you added him to the list, you send him the invite, and now Ted's going to fill out this form. So let's do this. What's your first name? Ted. What's your last name? Crewell. Ted Crewell at gmail.com. 888-888-888. Okay, same thing, email should fire off. So let's see what happens here. Do you see how, I know that happened really fast, but Ted Crewell was on the list. We didn't create a duplicate, but his status was updated to applied. Beforehand, Ted Crewell was just like Nathaniel Reed. We didn't have the interests of the source. By filling out the form, we've now updated his stage to applied. This is really powerful. It's very nifty, it's very helpful, and I want to show you what happens behind the scenes to make this possible. So let's go to the, if we go to workflows, we have manage volunteer applications from Typeform. So we set up an integration with Typeform. If you need help with that, I can do that in another video, and there's also good documentation on building that. It's pretty simple. You integrate it, you choose your connection. There's usually only one. If you have one Typeform account, you should only have one connection. And then you can choose from your forms in Typeform. So we're going to use the volunteer interest form. The goal is the fields on the form match the fields on the list. So I'm going to move this out of the way and let me refresh. I want to give us a little bit more space to see here. I want to get that out of the way. Okay, so this is what I'll just try and show you at a high level what happens. The form submits. So now we have a record. Here's what we have to do before that. We could just add it to the list. But as I said, that could create duplicates. For this process, we already put people on the list ahead of time for our identified process. So we actually want to essentially add or update. That's the principle. It's like if they already are on the list, don't duplicate it, just update their status. So first, we've got to find the list entries. So what I want to do is that person gave me their email address in Typeform. That's critical. That's the only way we can dedupe people, not with their names, not any other way. So the emails are always unique. We're going to say, match their email address to our list, give us one. So I want to see if there's one entry that has this email list or has this email address. So the find list entries is going to return one result with the email address. If it returns a result, we'll update the list entry. And by updating it, we're going to, let me get rid of that. I deleted something. We'll publish that. If they already exist on the list, for instance, the example was Ted Crewell, it was already on the list, we're going to update them. So we're going to say, update their stage to applied, and we're going to be able to pull directly from the form submitted. Sorry, not for this one. The stage is applied. So that one we're just going to do ourselves because we know if they applied on Typeform, that means they are now updating the stage to applied. For the rest, we're going to use variables. So for how did you hear about us? We're going to say, how did you hear about us? For your interests, we're going to say, what interests are you about volunteering with us? Which I already put, so I'm not going to duplicate. And those are the two fields from Typeform. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to publish that. Now, what if they weren't on the list? What if they just came across you on the website cold and they just want to be a volunteer? Well, that means they may not be in our CRM at all. So we have to create or update a people record. So essentially, we're going to say, hey, does anyone in our CRM have that email address? And we're going to match based on the email address they put on the form. If it matches, it's going to update it to, here's your first name, here's your last name, and we'll go ahead and update their phone number. I think that was one of the questions on the form. So this is create or update. If they don't exist, we're going to create them new. So we'll add their email address, first name, last name, and phone number. Perfect. And then once they're created, we'll add them to the list and we'll do the exact same things as before. We'll update their stage to applied. We'll link the fields in Attio to the fields in Typeform and move them along the process. All right, last thing I want to show you. So this is a really cool way to integrate Typeform and Attio. But here's one other cool thing that I want to show you. So let's say Greg Goat applied. We like him. We think that he should be active. So remember how we have all of these stages. So I'm going to say, right now this is filtered to identified, invited, or applied, and it says volunteers applications. So this is really where we're like funneling volunteers towards us. But we need probably another view for who are our active volunteers? Who have we already said yes to? So we also have active volunteers, and the stage is active. And the thing about volunteers, this is something I talk about a lot, when you bring people into a CRM, it's really important to have a way out or a way for them to become dormant. And so we're setting the term. Roger Rabbit's term begins January 21st and ends in 1 year. So we're saying the volunteer terms are 1 year, and that gives us a sense of renewal. We can reset whether or not we want them to be a volunteer in the future. So we have this volunteer application. We like Greg. We're going to set Greg to active, and I've got another automation, and I just want to show you what happens. All right, he disappears because he doesn't meet this filter. Greg Goat is now a volunteer. And when we go to active volunteers, there's going to be some cool things that happen. So he's here, he's active, but we also created term begins and term ends, and we used an automation to accomplish that. You can use automations for anything. Like the world is your oyster. As you're designing processes, if you think on the front end and you design on the front end, they become an incredibly powerful tool to help move people through an experience with your organization. It's one of the reasons I love Attio, the way it integrates with other tools like Typeform, and the way you can just move data throughout your organization. Hope this was helpful.